Imperial formation. This is probably... I would guess Shupe soldiers? Struggle a little bit with proactive plays. This deck. I'm gonna click this so that Shupe has less chance of seizing this Primordial Dao. Albeit, okay.
Sons of Nilfgaard!
This card is honestly pretty bad in versus Shupe soldiers because he has a lot of control. He has a lot of locks. I'm gonna just play it in this round. Roach is already out, but the thing is we're also getting Mage Assassins. We're getting Mage Assassins, which is why I played it on the right, because I wanted to leader it so that it doesn't get like tourney jousted or assassinated. How do you go blue each time? Just a coincidence. Nothing crazy. Just a coincidence. Should I hit this again? I think not. I don't know, actually. I really don't know. I'm kind of thinking about passing. I should have hit it. I should have hit it. Okay, I think we pass here. I don't want him to be able to set up the artifacts in round 2. I want to be able to have last say in round 2 to heatwave his carryover artifact. I don't think last say matters too much in this matchup. If he is Shupe soldiers. And this is still on. This will do nothing. When he plays another unit, this will hit a different unit. And he has to make a lot of points here to catch up. Kerp butchering my decks and selling to Shinmiri. Hey, Cintrin. What version or what's the difference in your deck? Like, see, we're getting good cards. We're getting good cards out of him. In order for him to make up this gap. It is Shupe. Wow. Wait, that's not even enough. He still has to play another card or he has to leader. Okay, so he's gonna leader and try to play like a truffle or an ale in round 2, and then we're gonna heat him. Oh man, I got bit by a mosquito. Take a mulligan here, I think. What card do I play? I need to play 3 cards in this round. 1, 2, and then I guess Blightmaker? I'm gonna get rid of one of the locks. Does he play Vilga? He plays Ale. Hello. Yellow. There's no Vilgefortz in my version with the ale. So I'm going to kind of assume that there's no Vilgefortz in his version either, which means he's not going to mill us. So I don't want to, like, pass early. Okay. Thanks, Cintron. We definitely play this. Is there anything worth banishing? I don't think so. I think we banish our own stuff in case he's playing Remedy. And then now, here's the question. Like, do we play... We play Imperial Golem? Because he's going to have some stuff to lock, right? He hasn't played any of his engines. I have 3 bricks in the deck. Okay, never mind. We play this. Play this. Too many decks. Too many bricks in the deck. Well, this kind of makes the Remedy thing... I mean, whatever. Blightmaker is not as good of a card as Light Cavalry. Oh. Yeah. I mean... We still have a brick. Rico's still a brick. Oh, God. Aguera's also a brick. Oh, fudge. Damn it. Okay, so... It looks like we're gonna play Rico for a 9. We're gonna go Roderick right now, Rico for a 9. And then... Because there's no way to get a gold into our deck, right? Like, we're not playing the Invo like I suggested. Aguera's a brick because I have a Roderick. Roderick has to play... He's not playing Henry. He's playing our deck. The Rico's not going to get better than a 9. Pretty sure.
Quiet as a mouse. Scrappy as a rat.
And we'll just have to rinse. We'll have to rinse like a 5 or a 3. Which is fine. I think we could get a rinse on a 5. I just need to make sure I thin one of these two before I go for the rinse. The rinse at least at a 5 can kill like an engine, maybe. Jonas! Hello, thanks for the 12 months. 1 year of Prime sub, thank you.
Oh my Christ, Henry, you sexy beast, you're the best Gwonty guard player on this here earth.
Oh no, he's not playing a deck that thins to 0. He's playing our deck as in the Shupe Ale the Ancestors deck. Thanks, Jonas. I thought he's still Gabbane. No. Seven damage on Ifrit. We want to play Imperial Golem. Imperial Golem is probably going to get like a 3 or a 4. Maybe an Alba Armored Cavalry at 5. Most likely a 3 or a 4. He has Shupe. Shupe is... He's not going to transform. No way he's going to transform. We have a Royal Decree. Oh, you see that Lemons play! The Lemons getting rid of our own engine, our own soldier engine. Now he has to take crap with this. Oh, that's nice. Oh, that's so good. Feels amazing. Okay, another thing. We have to play the other card. So, whatever we rinse, if we rinse the Alba Armored Cavalry, we have to play the Light Cavalry. If we rinse the Light Cavalry, we gotta play the Alba Armored Cavalry.
Is she? A fine
Let's just take this now.
of meat.
Since you're living in the EU, never see your Elden Ring stuff. How far are you in the DLC? Very far. We pretty much finished exploring all of the map. We're gonna head towards the ceiling tree and the final tower soon. Probably today. I'm liking it. I would say it's not as good as the base game, but I am still really enjoying playing Elden Ring.
Wars are won with discipline, my lords.
Weird. Okay. Took that from War Council? He hasn't played any engines yet. I think we probably just play this. Illusionist is on top, or was on top, so did he draw all of his 5p units then? He has Alba Armored Cavalry, Dwim, Light Cavalry, Marine in his hand? Are you an Elden Ring multiplayer person? No, I don't do much multiplayer. One more? One more? One more leader? Aw. Him. I think we leader this. I think we leader this because he's going to play another cavalry. I want to keep armor on my stuff. Your turn one Roderick also bricked his yoink Shupe. Oh yeah, that's right. See, now we're getting armor value from this.
Be gone. Leave us.
This enraged Ifrit is not looking great. Okay, we have Rience on a 5. If we really want to, or if we really need to, we can Rience the... I might go to 6. We can kill that though with enraged Ifrit. Or maybe it'll only grow once? Aww. Had my hopes. How does Construct Rience stack up so far? It's okay. It's not bad, but it doesn't feel great either. It feels like it lacks some points. I've had a much better feeling with the deck that our opponent's playing, as well as the other version of Rience with Albric. He's still holding on to a Shupe. You know what? I think I messed up. I think I needed to play this one turn earlier to threaten the cooldown on this. This does 5 damage? Like, there's so much armor everywhere. Okay. Like, I can't kill anything.
When I finish with them, there'll be nothing left to bury.
I think I gotta do this. I think if I play anything else, there's a pretty big chance that Rience will brick. If I play anything else. Because he has this. He has this that he can click to really mess us up. Okay, now we play... Now we play this. He shoops. But we're ahead in points. We should be okay. His last cards are Shupe and I think a bronze. Yeah. Okay, he plays Sergeant. He's not playing Verification. He's not playing Verification, he's not playing Crossbowman, I think. Can he win with the C's? 55. Yeah, I think he can win with the C's. Oh, I should not have buffed this to a 7. I should have kept stuff because I think 7 is the key strength that he needs to seize. If he seizes a 7, he gets 18 points plus the 6. That's 24. That ties. Oh, he doesn't go for the win. Does he? You can't win that way, dude. He could have gone for it. If he seizes the 9, he wins. If he seizes a 7, he ties. I mean, we beat the deck that we thought... I still think the Ale deck is better than this deck, but we were able to beat it. Big thing is that we heat waved the Ale in round 2. We passed round 1, right? We tempo passed round 1, forced him to play good cards in round 1 in order to win it. He goes down cards, and he can only establish his Ale of the Ancestors as carryover to round 3, and we're able to heat wave it. If we were not able to do that, we maybe lose the game. Let's say if we didn't have the heat wave by round 2, we maybe lose the game. It's pretty close, right? It was like what was it? It was like a 5-point game. Let me ask you, how common is the Vice matchup? Haven't really been motivated this month because I feel like Vice is overshadowing anything else. I do think Vice is extremely strong, but the play rate has not been that high in terms of pro rank. In terms of like where the MMR that I've seen so far, which is about 2400 to 2480. I don't think it's been like crazy high. Just anecdotally, I can check like what my SY encounter rate is, and most of the SY decks are going to be Vice. Just like occasionally Collusion. Both of those decks I think are very strong. But like Syndicate is Syndicate. Syndicate's always the faction that like even when it's really strong, its play rate is only like it's only normal. When Syndicate's play rate is like normal or average compared to the other factions, it means the faction is really, really strong. When the faction Syndicate is not really, really strong, just like regular power level or even below that, then like nobody plays it. So in the last 20 games, we've had 4 Syndicate. Last 40 games, we've had 6 Syndicate. Last 60 games, we've had 8 Syndicate as opponents. So yeah, it's still like fairly low. Last 80 games, we had 10 Syndicate. So make of that what you will. Last 100 games, we had 13 Syndicate. So 13% play rate for me in the last 100 games. This is all from this season. How do you set up Acherontia in Vice decks? You play Open Sesame or Shady Vendor into Open Sesame, and then you need to have a spender on the board, and you just play Acherontia, and you spend a bunch. You spend like 9 coins from your coin purse, and then you spend coins from your leader, and you activate the Open Sesames in your graveyard that give you more coins, and then Acherontia plays a card from the top of your deck, which might give you more coins. And it's like, usually it's usually really easy to have Acherontia activate once on the turn that you play it, and sometimes you can get it twice, and rarely you can get it 3 times. Very rarely, I would say 3 times. Honestly, not nearly as bad as I thought. Yeah, like I said, like Syndicate is very strong, but like people just don't play it. The casual players don't play it because it's hard to pilot. It's also harder for, like, especially in lower ranks, newer players don't have access to Syndicate cards because you don't have like Correct me if I'm wrong, there's no like starter syndicate cards, right? Like when you create a new account, your account has 0 syndicate cards. Is that correct? I might be wrong. Maybe you do have starter syndicate. It's Firesworn? They give you Firesworn cards? Zero syndicate cards, only congregate deck. Oh, so you own wait, really? What? You own 0 syndicate cards in your collection, but you can play a congregate deck, like a pre-made congregate deck? Oh, that's weird. I didn't know it was like that. Yeah, NG is the opposite story of Syndicate. NG's play rate is always super high, even when it sucks. Or maybe it's like... It's also a little bit of the factor of... Because so many casual players like playing Nilfgaard, they bring the win rate down, and it looks like... The data looks like and Nilfgaard sucks, whether it actually sucks or not. I thought last season, Nilfgaard was the best faction. Last season. This season, probably not. So this season is probably Syndicate. Okay. Hi, Ritz. We don't have our Frenzy Dow. We could try to YOLO it with Roderick. We are always blue coin. Why are we always blue coin? Damn it. Nice, that's a low power at least. Shupe Ale Soldiers, yeah, that's the one that I would consider best deck from last season. Well, let me put this here. That I can swap it with, when I play the cavalry, I can swap into this. This gave him armor, yeah, that's why this is 2 armor. Hey Backaby, what do you think are the top decks right now? Probably some Syndicate deck. Some Vice deck is probably the #1 deck in the game right now. Not sure exactly which is the optimized version or the best version, but there's Line Pockets version, there's Off the Books version, there's a version that has hybrid with Bounty. And then for other factions, I think Silver Witcher's Cohen, I think is very good with Uprising. And I think the Shupe Soldier's Ale deck is still also very, very good. I would put those top 3. But, I mean, it's still early in the season. And also keep in mind, I tend to play some, like, relatively weirder stuff. I don't necessarily play, like, all the best decks. Mostly like to play Swarm decks. Oh, if you like Swarm decks, yeah, the Golden Necker Kiki Queen deck in our spreadsheet is really good, too. I'm actually undefeated with it. I think we're 11-0 with that deck. But I also have... I kind of have doubts on it being, like, one of the best decks in the meta. Because it didn't really get any changes. Like, it got Yennefer, but the Yennefer's been very bleh, very meh in the deck. I've been wanting to change her out, but I'm 11-0 with it. Despite the Yennefer playing for like 6 points in a lot of games. Hammond! Yo, Gulo! Gulo, are you there? Our opponent just played a Hammond. Gulo? I have a similar list to yours, but I had bad luck with Caranthir. Gotcha. Caranthir is very good in the deck, though, because he procs the Thrive of Kiki Queen immediately when you play Caranthir. Relatively weirder stuff. Since when? In my opinion, your spreadsheet is always a fairly accurate meta report at the end of the month. Really? I'm surprised to hear that. I don't even feel like my spreadsheet is a accurate meta report. But at what MMR, Jonas, are you seeing decks from my spreadsheet? I feel like when I play on pro rank in like around 2450 to 2550, I rarely see decks from my spreadsheet. Like actually pretty rarely. Kill the okay. We thin.
I bring death. Quite literally.
Nice. We dodged armor. The queen was always OP. People just slept on her because of Kashe, maybe. Couldn't combo him like 6 games in a row from bad draws. You don't have to combo him. You can just play him. I also have, I think in those 11 games, maybe comboed him 0 or 1 time. With like the whole Fisher King set him up at the top of the deck and then play Golden Necker into Caranthir while Kiki Queen is in your hand. It's very rare. But you don't need it to win. You just play him from hand and he thrives through your entire row of Insectoids. And then you have also combined with Search Scratch a lot. I have a hard time finding people's decks in general, to be honest, at Pro Rank, but even before. Yeah, it's even harder now. People are playing more homebrews now that, like, there's no official competitive season. Do we ever pass? Like, I don't know what to open with. I guess we open with lemons? Yes.
Nice scars? No, they don't hurt.
How or when did Aretusa die? I don't even know the exact date or time. Just like the competitive players. I mean, if you want to have a fight, I don't know. Like, there were a couple of people, like I think like Shaggy and Red Dream, they still played competitively for a while after like a lot of the other members, like the OG members like Colomon and Demorcus kind of stopped playing. And then in terms of the content creation side, at some point, like, there just wasn't enough motivation for people to do the content creation. We weren't really making any money from it. Yeah, and then it just kind of died. I have too many locks. But I want to thin so that I don't end up bricking, because I have like 4 bricks in the deck right now. Barrel Bond. This doesn't look like a Compass deck at least. Oh. Oh, that's locked. Wait, I can Purify it. Oh, snap.
Be gone. Leave us.
We've purified and then we frenzy down for extra 3 damage. That's kind of hilarious. The Aguera value, yeah. Although, like, I might actually want that lock for the second front row boat. But we have damage, we have Rience. It'll be fine. There was a best boy? Trying to brick like Freya's in case he's playing Freya or Otkel. We're still losing our card though. Maybe I should have just passed on 7, but wait, what was that? You just discarded Pirate Cap? Wait, what? Oh no, he put the Bjorn back into his hand. Okay. So this is our pass. We do have a pass here. We could also play Enraged Ifrit. A move like this always has a flat % chance of causing an opponent to forfeit. Yeah. What do you guys think? Pass or play Enraged Ifrit? Enraged Ifrit doesn't play for that much. It only plays for like 9? And then we're up 13 and he's got 6 points from leader. Yeah, I think we should just pass. We got our thinning. Let's just get out. We got our thinning. We kept it card. Let's just get out. Oh. If only, I mean, if I didn't open with lemons, I could have gotten this Naval Supremacy. But I didn't have any other proactive play. And he waited obviously until the lemons died or until I passed to play that. We brick the Royal Decree. No, we didn't brick. We can Roderick the Royal Decree into the Primordial Dow after we Rience. Yeah. I have single lasse. Think we do Enraged Ifrit. Yeah. Most of his cards are gonna be fine. Like most of his cards are gonna have armor, so even though the Naval Supremacy hits them, we should still be fine on the Rico. I was wondering if it was gonna be this. I don't even know if I need to heat wave that. That actually might be wrong. I did that too fast. Yeah, I definitely did that too fast. Because I don't think that scenario is going to get that much value. This is our Rience.
Of the sea?
Let's you and me have some fun.
Rience is gonna die though. Rience is gonna die, but whatever.
What session one?
Oh my god. Value. And we just do this now, right? Maybe I should have waited. I mean, this kind of goes tall. Kind of taller for no reason, and I'm hitting armor. But this armor, I'm gonna have to hit this armor anyways because of the Colossal Ifrit, most likely. Oh, maybe I shouldn't have used all my leader charges. I should have saved one leader charge to re-armor it. Yeah. Oops. That was silly.
But
He kills it anyways.
It's not on any maps.
No good wine will come from here, not even compost.
Hey, Lolatel. What are we playing? We're playing some Rience Constructs shared with us by Perperton. Apparently it's Centurion Lion's deck. Oh, Centurion Lion also he linked me his version of the deck. He was playing Imposter. We take this now that there's no. Yeah. Oh. Actually. Oh, that was a mistake. Now he gets to bounce this. But I get to play around a Heat Wave or a Tall Punish by not playing this Roderick now. And he doesn't want to bounce this because he doesn't want to lose this card. Are we losing? No, we're winning by a tiny, tiny little bit. Oh, that gets hit too. Oh, that's funny. Okay. The Roderick also gets hit even on his side. Spies get hit by naval supremacy. GG. I mean, it's such a close game. I feel like... Yeah, I feel like this deck needs some improvement. I don't know. I don't get what you just typed, Jonas, but... The game plan is stretching out rounds with Blightmaker and Mage Assassin and then rely on constructs. I don't know about the stretching out rounds. I think this is just like a value deck. It's a value deck. I have not so far been able to get more than one click on Colossal Ifrit, mainly because I often play him late and when there's no time for his cooldown anyways. Because like you have to wait for your opponent to, you have to play all your constructs and then you got to wait for your opponent to play into your Colossal Ifrit. And in order to play your other constructs like Enrage Ifrit, like you have to wait for them to play like a good tall thing that you want to remove. So there's a lot of waiting that's required before you can play your Colossal Ifrit. And by the time you can play a good Colossal Ifrit, there's not usually 4 turns left. And if there is 4 turns left, it like almost always dies, even with Imperial Formation protection. But maybe I should just try playing it a little bit earlier for like suboptimal value just to bait like a hard removal and then the Rience lives. Maybe that's what I should be doing more. Value in terms of Blightmaker is what now? 11 for 6. 11 for 6 with 1 thin. Very, very good. That was the way to go back then. Yeah, like they Blightmaker, Mage Assassin started out as 5 provisions on Blightmaker, 4 provisions on Mage Assassin. It was extremely OP. And this was back in the day before like there was as much power creep. Now it's like close to there again, but now the game has like stronger bronzes overall, so it's like more acceptable. It's still very, very strong. You didn't miss early BC ideas. No, we're actually going to talk about it now, I think. So yeah, well, let's talk about some early Balance Council ideas, shall we? I'm curious on what you guys think. So I think buffs are going to be the majority of this talk, mainly because we're still early in the season. But I do want to touch a little bit on nerfs first as a short section. If you guys could choose some cards to nerf right now, only being like a week and a half into the season, what would you choose? You can just type them in chat. Anything that comes to mind. And like, preferably if you type which direction, like provisions or power that you would choose to nerf a card. Brawler? How would you want to nerf Brawler, Dean? Godric Soldier. Soldier of Godric nerf. Dwim Provisions. Okay. Dwim Provisions. I would go Dwim Power. I do think Dwim is a good candidate for a nerf. But I think Dwim Power is better because the problem with Dwim is its power. It's not anything, I don't think it's anything super the word I'm looking for, innate to Dwim, or her concept that's wrong. I think it's just her power is very good. She's like 10 for 5 almost every deck that she's played in, and then there are some decks where she has a lot of upside, more than 10. But I think like if you nerf her to 3 and she's like a 9 for 5, that becomes much more acceptable. She does have conditions and she can brick. She's also becomes easier to kill if you're trying to like teleport her or reinforcements her or something. Yeah, and keep in mind, like, power decrease category is much harder to fill than provision increase category. And so because there's not many good targets for the power decrease category, if we find a nerf target that could be power decrease and it's like acceptable for it to be power decrease, we should try putting it there. we should lean towards putting it into power decrease because it's so hard to fill that category. Yeah, and I also think Dwim provision nerf is just too harsh. Cohen provision nerf. So Cohen provision nerf is interesting. I also like the idea of Cohen provision nerf. He's getting a little bit too good. He often plays like in the decks that he's, but would it kill the card if you provision nerf Cohen because it affects how much boost AA gives to him, right? So if we look at Cohen, right now AA gives him 3 boost, which puts him at 5, which is perfect for commandos if commandos remain at 5 power. It's also very good for Griffin Witcher adepts. And with the Uprising Silver Witcher's deck, it puts him at 7 after an All God buff, which puts him at the same power as... No. It puts him 1 power above Silver Witchers. So if you nerf him by provisions, actually, it doesn't really hurt the Silver Witcher's deck that much. Because he'll actually end up being the same power from AA. If you play him from AA, he'll be the same power as the Silver Witchers. Whereas right now he ends up 1 power over the Silver Witchers, and then you use the Uprising to, like, you could even maybe play this deck without Uprising if he got a provision nerf. It's interesting though. I do think Cohen is a little bit too good.
Us real quick.
Hi Quasar, thanks for the 2 months. I'm gonna say a pass on the meowing. It sounds just kind of weird, but thanks for the sub. Ross Marinus says Cohen, it's hard to nerf him without killing him. Does he die at 7 provisions? I don't think he's dead at 7 provisions. He is definitely much worse with commandos, but I don't think he's really that much worse with Silver Witchers and the All God Offering deck. And he's also not really that much worse with like a Priestess Renfrey Cohen type of deck, but that isn't very strong. 1 power, 6 provisions? No, that just makes him better, Lolatel. 1 power nerfs to Cohen make him better because the amount he boosts by is equal to the amount the amount of boost he has on himself. So if you nerf him to 1 power, he will still line up with the Silver Witchers trio when you AA him after you put 1 Offering or 1 All God buff on him. But now he's boosting 7s by 6 points each instead of 5 points each. Nerf Cohen to 3/6. Yeah, I mean, he used to be there. He used to be 3/6. That's also I think if we had to nerf Cohen, I would nerf him to 7 provisions. I think that's probably the best way to do it, and I don't think it kills him completely. He should actually be 5/6. Dude, if at 5 power he's dead. Nobody's ever gonna play him at 5 power. It will be way too hard to get value from him at 5 power. You would have to have like everything at like 10 power or 9 power, and it's just too hard to set up. You think Cohen is fine? So in the Silver Witcher's Uprising deck, Cohen is playing for he's playing for like 22 very often. He's playing for 22 for 6 very, very often. You do have to sometimes use an AA for him though. I'm not sure like how the calculations exactly work out. But I mean, at the same time, like without the Cohen interaction, without how good Cohen is, the deck is pretty bad without Cohen. But the Cohen interaction is so cheap, so efficient in terms of points. And it'll still be really good. It'll be a 7 provision card that still provides 20-something points. It'll still provide usually 20-something points. It'll just be 1 provision more expensive. It'll lose a little bit of its flexibility, maybe, or maybe it'll gain flexibility. This is a hard change to evaluate. It's like Gourd. It's a little bit more risk reward than Gourd. It has higher ceiling than Gourd, but it has much more conditions, right? And it's not like a card that you can kind of singly slam at the end of the game. Balance Console finally made him good, but these days he overperforms a little bit. Yeah, I think Provision nerf better than Power nerf. Power nerf will probably kill him again, and Provision nerf at least won't completely kill him, but it'll nerf him a little bit. I take issue more with adepts than Cohen. You can't remove adepts through traditional means except lock. Yes, I agree. I also think that the better nerf for Witchers is nerfing this card to 5 provisions. At 4 provisions, people didn't really play this card. It didn't have enough of a ceiling. At 5 power, or at 4 power, people didn't really play this card. At 5 power, it's extremely good. And I think like it could be one of those cards that's like 5 provisions because it has a lot of. It's very similar to stuff like. It's very similar to stuff like Whisperer, Revenant, Self-Eater. Right, it's a 3-point per turn engine with maybe more upside because of the shield. So it's like something like a 3 to 5 point per turn engine. And it's very hard to answer. It should be a 5p card. I think at 4 provision, at 4 power, he's just not interesting. At 4 power, he's not interesting. At 5 power, he's interesting, but he should be more expensive. Yeah. So I would vote to nerf this to 5 power, and nerf this to 5 provisions, and I would maybe do that first before the Cohen change. Do that first, see how the deck is, see how the archetype of Witchers is with just this change, and not nerf Cohen right away. Like, I think we should try to... The number one thing we should try to avoid with Balance Council is over-buffing or over-nerfing things. And we have established line of communication with the Russian and Chinese influencers for Balance Council within their communities, and we're going to try to like at least share our ideas with each other so that we don't end up inadvertently over nerfing or over buffing something. So like 2 seasons, or not this most recent Balance Council, but the Balance Council before that was like over buffed Warriors, over buffed Harmony, and all of those buffs got reverted. Pretty much all of those buffs got reverted. I think like Vabjorn's buff survived, but it was a bunch of wasted votes, and people were unhappy with the meta and also unhappy with the Balance Councils both times. And I just think that if for example, if the Dryad Fledgling buff never went through, but the Waters buff and maybe the Sasuke buff went through, then Harmony probably keeps its buffs. And the meta has more variety, whereas Harmony is back to like never played again, almost never played at this point because all of its buffs got reverted. Same thing with Warriors. Warriors went from not being played in the month that Pirates was super popular to being played all the time last season because they got like 6 buffs at the same time, and then 5 out of those 6 buffs got reverted, and now they're never played again. So if we could have avoided the overbuff on Warriors, they probably keep some of their buffs, like the Skeweredell buff or the War of Clans buff. But the Highland Warlord, if it remains at 6p or something like that, then it's probably fine. And then Skellige gets another option, and there's still a viable deck that remains in the meta, but not being too powerful. And we could have used those votes for something else, right? Ale of the Ancestors. Ale of the Ancestors, I think it's arguable to give Ale of the Ancestors a nerf, but I would also prefer to nerf Dwim first over Ale of the Ancestors. Ale of the Ancestors sees some play, but I also don't want to kill the card. I'm not sure. Ale of the Ancestors has a really, really high carryover factor to it, which those sort of cards typically are not very healthy. But I would probably like to nerf personally Dwim first before Ale of the Ancestor and then reevaluate. And then the other card I want to nerf is Full Test. I think regardless of what happens with commandos, whether commandos stay the same or get nerfed back to 4 power or get nerfed to 6 provisions, I think this card is possibly one of the most toxic cards in the entire game. I hated it when it came out. I vehemently tried to convince CDPR to change the design of this card, but it's just super unhealthy. It is the epitome of answer or lose in round 1, and it has the carryover, a ridiculous amount of carryover factor into this answer or lose round 1 card. Yeah, 11 points a turn. This card is like 11 points a turn if unanswered. So, you know how there will probably come a point where we'll run out of cards to nerf. And like Chinese community already doing this a lot, where they're like they're trying to nerf like living armor cards that just are placeholders in the nerf slots without actually nerfing anything. I would nominate King Foltest as a card to nerf into Oblivion. I would not mind if this card got nerfed to 30 provisions and just like was deleted. And then I think commandos could stay happily at 5 for 5, 5 power, 5 provisions if this card did not exist. And then you maybe have some sort of commando lists that don't play Foltest. Maybe they would need to be a little bit stronger if Foltest didn't exist. I'm not sure. It's a provision nerf. I would say provision nerf makes more sense because like this card could be created from Temple, and you don't want this to be like a complete dud for Temple. At 5 power, when this is created from Temple, people are usually like, meh. It's not a great card for Temple already, so like nerfing it in power hurts Temple even more. And it's already not a great card to take from Temple. So I think like provisions makes more sense. But again, power nerf is the category that's harder to find cards for, so I could see it going either way. Oh yeah, and the other card that I'm actually really high on nerfing is Revenant. I think Revenant also, by the same idea, same logic of Griffin Witcher Adept being a 5 provision card, Revenant should be a 5 provision card. It's just too high of a ceiling or too high of an engine per turn. For a 4P card, a 4P card should not be able to get you 5 points a turn. This should be a 5P card. I tried to organize a vote to nerf this 2 months ago and didn't go through. Revenants should be 5P card. 4 power, 5 provisions. And also Whisperer, I think Whisperer of Doblathana, now we're kind of getting into buff territory. Whisperer of Doblathana should be 4 power, 6 provisions, I think. And Whisper of Doblathana, 4 power, 6 provisions, whereas Revenant's 4 power, 5 provisions, because Whisper of Doblathana can be activated multiple times in one turn, whereas Revenant can mostly only be activated once per turn, unless you have like a lot of Zeal charges. But usually, realistically, Revenant's activated once a turn. Whisper of Dolphana can be activated multiple times a turn, including multiple times on the turn that she's played. So I think I would nerf the Whisperer to a 6 provision first, and then buff her the next season to 4 power. I do think Whisperer was like a little overpowered at 4 power, 5 provisions. Because you can't, like, she can be activated on the same turn. Like, you play her with, if you play her with orbs, or you play her with those artifacts with order, like Truffle, like Mahakam Pass, or a leader like Mahakam Forge, right? You can activate her like 5 times on the turn that you play her, and she's already at 20. And then, like, even if you activate her twice on the turn that you play her, she's a 12 for 5, and then requires an answer. Otherwise, she goes on to be playing for like 24, 28 points. So her kind of floored, yeah, like if you play her and you don't activate her on the same turn, you play her as a 4 and she gets answered, then she has a really low floor. But good players playing good decks often will not play her as a 4 for 5. Like minimum 8 for 5 on the turn that she's played, sometimes more. With the power level of the game, filling a row with just 4s is not amazing. I agree. There is definitely the cap of filling a row with 4s, but that's mostly a problem just in the long round. Like, this game has 3 rounds, right? And if you, like, there's going to be a round where your opponent needs to win. And in that round, it doesn't need to be a 10-card round. You can just have a short-ish to medium round where you fill the row with this card. It gets like 28, 36 points. And then you just pass, and your opponent actually has to make the points. What's bad with nerfing Temple? I'm nerfing it every month. I think Temple has been nerfed enough. But yeah, I'm not super against the idea of nerfing Foltest by power. I do think that provisions would be a little bit more appropriate, but I wouldn't be crying if we nerfed him by power instead. How do you feel about a harvest buff? I do think that it's okay to buff Bountiful Harvest to 5 provisions. Yeah, it's definitely a card that Lyra and I recently talked about. Harvest. This card is, even at 5 provisions, it would be worse than backup plan outside of hand buff decks. Right? It's 2 points plus a random bronze elf. But the 2 points aren't damage. Backup plan is really good, partially because it helps kill stuff a lot with the help of leader charges or with the help of Milva or something sometimes just by itself. Like, backup plan has a decent chance of killing a 4 or 5 a lot of times. Because also backup plan's pool of bronze elves is also tighter, smaller, and I think better. A seer does not need a buff. I think a seer is fine. In fact, I think like I would want to nerf Alyssa, if anything. Not a seer, but Alyssa. I think I would nerf. These cards that like replay win conditions, I feel like could be a little bit more expensive. Alyssa also often paired with Simless. And I did try to nerf Simless in the past, but I do think that it makes maybe more sense to nerf Alyssa than Simless. Because Simless playing 2 cards isn't that big of a problem. It's Simless playing like 4 cards or more that becomes the problem. Can't see playing Spelltell with even 2 provisions less. The deck was middling at best, even when she was 4 for 5. Wait, Whisperer? No, the deck was really good. The quadruple Froth deck, when Whisperer was at 4, was really good. Can we nerf Flaminica? Corrupted Flaminica? I just lost to it. Eventually, I wouldn't mind nerfing Corrupted Flaminica one more, and then, but like, we gotta buff Beasts SK some other way, I think, before we nerf Flaminica, or at the same time. Didn't know there was a song on the premium. Yeah. Also good in Symbiosis. Sure, yeah, it is good in Symbiosis. Water back to 9. Yes, water back to 9 would be good, but not a buff to Dryad Fledgling. Shaping Nature to 8. I think it's okay. I don't know how much of a priority it is. Like, the main thing, the main argument I've heard Shaping Nature to 8 is so that After Waters to 9, Philavandrel doesn't have any RNG at 9 provisions. Buffing Sea Serpent to 4p for your Lippy Beast deck. Okay, so these are all the bronze elves in the game. These are all the bronze elves in the game. So we've got which ones have deploy? Oh, you know what I should do? I never understood why the deck builder on the website is better than the deck builder in the game. This. Here. So faction, Scoia'tael. Tag, elf. Color, bronze. So these are all the bronze elves in the game in Scoia'tael. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 24 plus 3, 27. There's 27 of them. And then the ones that have deploy, there's 19 of them. So I guess there's 8 that don't have deploy. Which are the 8 that don't have deploy? Oh, why does it have to reset like that? Elf. Intel. How's the player base at the moment? It's very good. It's very healthy. 2 times are short. You think prioritizing a harvest buff helps a lot of ST decks that are currently beneath the meta? Like Devotion Symbiosis? Like Spellitel? All the mages mostly. So Sorcerers of Doblathana, Sentry, Seer, Whisperer, that's 4, Swordmaster, 5, Scribe, 6, Elven Scout, 7. I'm missing one. And Vernacio's Commando, 8. Those are the 8. So yeah, Bountiful Harvest can see all of these. Backup plan. Yeah, so like I do think Bountiful Harvest at 5 provisions makes sense. This is dragging on a little bit long, but I do think Bountiful Harvest at 5 provision makes a lot of sense. I think it would be fine at 5 provisions, and it would also encourage hand buff a little bit more because hand buff would get more buffed from that change than other Scoia'tael stuff. Hand buff and Symbiosis, I would say, are the two archetypes that get buffed a little bit more. Buff Alzer and Salve by provisions. I like where your head is at. I like it. Buff Yaga? No, never. Yaga is another one of those cards I would really not mind nerfing to 25 provisions. This card being playable is not good for the game. It's unredeemable. Unsalvageable, the design of this card. Let's see here. So I have this tab in my deck spreadsheet called BC Ideas. I put some stuff here. Ignore the headers of like who's voting for what. I was doing a little exercise where I was thinking if I could handpick the 40 cards that went through the Next Balance Council, 10 from each category, what would I pick? And it was difficult for the buffs in terms of like there were too many things that I wanted to put on the buff side and not enough slots. And then it was also difficult on the nerfs because there were like not enough things I actually wanted to nerf and too many slots, too many things to nerf. Especially this power decrease category was so hard. Uh, but yeah, this was kind of what I came up with. So we talked about like Revenant, Whisper of Doblathana, Full Test, Novigrad, and Candle for Syndicate. Mariels, these were like not necessary at all. Slave Driver revert to 6p. Commando to 6p. Add up to 5p. The Quack's Nerf Boner is real. This, I mean, this was the 10th card I put in because I didn't know what to put in. Bountiful Harvest buff, Waters of Brocklon buff, Ethne buff for ST. D Shackles. There was a tweet by, I wanted to ask you guys about Dimeridium Shackles. There was a tweet by J. William James, I think, yesterday that was thinking about suggesting the idea to buff Dimeridium Shackles to 4 provisions. War of Clans buff is a no-no? Why? What's wrong with this? If only this went through and no other warrior buffs, especially if tier also gets a provision increase. I think War of Clans is totally fine. If you buff War of Clans but you don't buff Highland Warlord, I think it's totally fine. D-Shackles, yeah, so D-Shackles to 4p. It would be 3 damage plus a lock, a neutral card. It's an alchemy tag. It's an alchemy tag. Lock a unit and damage it by 3. At 4 provisions, it would be a neutral tech that's worse and less flexible than Van Morlehem Hunter. So I don't even know if it would be good, but it would give every faction an option to tech in a low-cost lock. It would be worse than Van Morlehem Hunter because it doesn't have the option to play for 5 points. It's also worse than Van Morlehem Hunter because it doesn't have armor. It's also worse because you have to damage the unit instead of just playing the 3 points as a body, which is worse because the unit that you want to lock might have armor, it might have shield, so you don't want to necessarily damage it. Or it might be lower than 3 power. So you would lose points on all those situations where the Van Morlehem Hunter would not lose points. It also helps Alchemy a little bit more than the other factions, which Alchemy does need a little bit of help. It's an Alchemy tag, so it would buff like the Preachers, and it can be optionally replayed by Pro-Clan Druid and Bride of the Sea. Oh, it also helps Syndicate because Syndicate has no locks. It definitely sees 0 play at 5 provisions. At 4 provisions, I still think it's not that good. I would at least want to try it out and see how it goes. This is also a card that if you buff to 4p, it indirectly nerfs high impact engines like Answer or Lose type of cards. It negatively impacts or indirectly nerfs Answer or Lose type of cards, which is kind of good in my opinion. It nerfs cards like Full Test indirectly because if you are playing Full Test, then now somebody can get through your defender and then de-shackles your Full Test. Yeah, if we nerf Dwim, we're also indirectly nerfing Alchemy a little bit there too, yeah. What do you think about buffing some cards that never get played, like Gregoire, Carlo, Blizzard, Hailstorm? I'm okay with buffing cards that never get played. This is a card that never gets played. I would say that there are higher priorities than a lot of the cards that you listed. I think out of the cards that you listed, I think Gregoire and Carlo are more interesting cards to buff than Blizzard or Hailstorm. But you also have to think, like, how good does Gregoire or Carlo need to be to see any play? It needs to, because they're also neutral cards, right? Including, and this also kind of applies to D-Shackles. These neutral cards that don't really have strong archetype synergy, you have to be careful with buffing them because they need to be at a point where they're not that good. They're just kind of mediocre, except in niche decks where they're a little bit more useful. Like Gregoire could be mediocre unless you're playing a deck with King Rogner or Damned Sorceress, and then he's better. And you play him in those sort of decks, but not good enough to just play in a random deck as a mid-range card. Or you play him in a deck that has an easy time of setting opponents' units to 1, rather than just any deck. Right? I guess, so like, that could make more sense, but he needs to be at the right power level so that he is not playable in every deck. But remember early Homecoming? If you guys remember early Homecoming, this guy was a Giga Chad in early Homecoming. He was in every single deck. He was in every single deck in early Homecoming. Auto include neutral card. Oh wow, he's a 13 for 9? This card got buffed like last year before CDPR went into the sunset. They I think they buffed this card by like 2 or 3 boost. Oh yeah, he has synergy with 1 power spies. Yeah. But I don't know. I don't think this is such a high priority card to buff. He already has a pretty good upside. If you can activate him, he is a 13 for 9 with a shield. That's good. Right? Maybe one more point or one more provision and people will start playing him, I think. Yeah, I mean, Gregoire. I think you would want to give him provisions because he already goes really tall himself. He's already 12 power himself. So probably give him provisions. Carlo Varese. What do you guys think about Carlo? This card, funnily enough, both these two cards were auto-include at one point. Or like super popular in the meta. Carlo Varese, you gotta go a little bit further back. Do you guys remember? He used to be called Cleaver in open beta. He was played in this like the Brewer ST spy abuse deck, silver spy abuse deck, where you would open with silver spy on turn 1 and Cleaver or Carlo Varese the silver spy, which was really tall, on turn 2, flip the card advantage, and then like you would be. There's a little bug here. But yeah, like you would need to access this card in round 1 a lot of times. But it could use a buff. I don't really know. I'm not really sure off the top of my head what stat line you would have to buff him to for this card to be good. Like he's just right now, because there's no silver spies in the game anymore. There's not really like a great way to put a bunch of power on your opponent's deck. Like maybe this card could fit into enemy boost NG. But even that's not that good, right? Because enemy boost NG, they don't want to damage the card that is tall on your opponent's side. They want to just bring the points over to their side with Ivar or Beauclair. So, like, what would you even play this in? You basically would need to give it enough power or low enough provisions that you would play it as an early round removal card. Your opponent plays like a 6 or a 7 or an 8 on their turn 1, and then you play Carlo Varese. Right? They play like a 6, 7, 8 engine on turn 1 or turn 2, and then you Carlo Varese them, and you answer their engine. But even... Right? But like then he becomes a brick in later parts of the game. In later rounds of the game, he becomes a brick. If if like round 1 and round 2 go long, and then you draw him in round 3, he sucks. It's a Crystal Skull unit killer. Yeah, kind of like, yeah, exactly. Is it the mosquito part 2? It's luckily not a mosquito. I think it's just a little small fruit fly or something. So I'm not as freaked out. But I did get bit by a mosquito earlier today. Ugh. I listed these cards like some examples. They used to be good, but I was talking about the never used cards. We can go through a lot of them, like Stennis Vissigurd, that used to be ridiculously broken. Greater Brothers Vess. Yeah. So it's a tricky balance, right? I do think there is a place for buffing these really weak cards, but you also don't want to spend an entire month or season buffing only useless cards, and then they don't impact the game. They don't impact the meta. I think you want to have a balance of like some changes that impact the meta that are actually going to get these cards to be played immediately, and then maybe also a couple of changes in here that might take multiple seasons to get them either to be played. Either you have to buff them again to see them play, or you have to buff like other parts of their archetype or their package to get them to see play. So there needs to be a balance that's struck. There are also just some cards that are just not that interesting. Even if you buff them, like, they're just not adding that much interest or fun to the game. Yeah, so I mean, this is kind of what I came up with. I in terms of archetypes, I do like to think about buffing things in terms of archetypes. I try to look at like which archetypes would I want to buff first, and then figure out within those archetypes which cards to buff. But like I would like to buff Swarm NR with like Meave. The way to buff that would be to buff Carrick Frigate. Either power or provisions is okay. When it comes to Carrick Frigate, would you guys support more of a power buff or more of a provision buff? Which buff to Carrick Frigate would you support more? Power +1, provision -1. I started a poll in Twitter, or not Twitter, Twitch. If you guys want to vote in the poll, I'd be curious on what your opinions are. I think there's like arguments for both, to be honest. Power gives it more survivability, but even at 5 power, 1 armor, it's still kind of vulnerable. And a lot of times you might want to play it with like shield wall or something anyways. You know, so making it go down to 5 provisions would make it cheaper, and then you'd probably if you do make it go down in provisions, you probably have to play it with like shield wall or something, like maybe Inspired Zeal. Inspired Zeal is usually there's a lot better Inspired Zeal targets than Carrick Frigate. But yeah, Carrick Frigate is a buff to help NR swarm the board, and then I really think I would love to buff Meave indirectly by buffing Inspired cards. Inspired cards, if you guys didn't know, Meave has this new ability that CDPR gave her a while after she was introduced, that on deploy, she reduces her timer. Her initial timer gets reduced by 1 for each adjacent unit that has an inspired ability. They don't actually have to be inspired. They don't have to have green health. They just need to have the word inspired in their text. But like a lot of these cards are giga bad. So I was thinking, if we buff some of these inspired cards like Radovid's Royal Guard to be a little bit better, then Meave, if Meave can activate her ability, if she can be played in between 2 inspired cards, she immediately activates her ability on the turn that she's played. And then she can't be answered, and her floor becomes much, much better. And her stealing is also improved because she gets to trigger earlier. Her second, third triggers become earlier, right? And they don't require as long of a round. That would be a great way to buff Meve. So that's what, like, one of the reasons why we buffed Anna Stranger was that she has synergy with Meve. She's not really played yet, but this is one of those cards I think it's going to take multiple seasons for her to see some play, whether it's buffing her or just buffing other cards in her package. But like buffing Radovid's Royal Guard, buffing maybe Baron. These cards already see play, so I wouldn't buff these cards. Priscilla is really good with Demavend, and I don't really want to buff Demavend. So I think like it would be Radovid's Royal Guard would be my number one inspired card to buff, and then maybe like these 4 cards. I'm not sure. Anna could use another buff, maybe. She's currently a 5-point card that gets 2 points a turn. 5 power, 2 points a turn that has a condition, a pretty significant condition, somewhat, for 7 provisions. That still seems power creep to me. She does have synergy with some other stuff. She helps protect stuff as well if she survives. Oh, the results are in. Carrick Frigate, 65% of you would buff it by power, and 35% would prefer to buff it by provisions. Okay. It's pretty close. It seems pretty close, but I would say that, like, regardless of which one, I would like to see it buffed, Carrick Frigate buffed one way or the other. You didn't even know that she had that deploy now, yeah. Frigate at 5 provisions while Von Hurst is at 8. Von Hurst has a fee and also automatically spawns a unit every single turn. You don't have to click him. He doesn't have cooldown 2 with the additional crew condition. But yeah, I think Von Hurst could probably be buffed one more time at most. There are too many 5P siege engines already. Not all of them need to be 5P. But Frigate and the other siege engines are not really played in the same deck. Yeah. Frigate and the other siege engines are not really played in the same deck. They're trying to do different things. The other siege engines are trying to damage, set up things for like Revenant. And if you play them with Stockpile, like this is going to flood the board too quickly. This kind of has anti-synergy with Revenants as well, because it floods the board. I wouldn't really say that it was an issue that like too many siege engines are at 5P. Yeah, when 6 for 4 was peak, Radovid's Royal Guard was in every NR deck. Now Radovid's Royal Guard, like I do think Radovid's Royal Guard would be fine at 4 power. It would be like you could play him immediately as a 6 for 4. Or you could try to greet him as a 5 for 4 with a floor of 5. If you play him back rows, a floor of 5, but he can get like 7 or maybe more if you can get his armor value. But pretty difficult to get his armor value. Usually to get his armor value, you'd have to like buff a dueler and there would have to be a tall target or something. Royal Cards is a card I'm here to buff. Nice. What is Centurion Lion saying? I would nerf Frigate, to be honest. Yeah, anyways, this is what I was thinking for the NR Swarm archetype. Buff to Frigate, buff to Royal Guards. Maybe that's it for now. But I also wouldn't mind buffing like one more inspired card. Okay, and then another archetype that I would like to buff would be like Spell ST. Spell ST with a buff to Bountiful Harvest, with an eventual buff to Whisperer to 4 power 6 provisions, a buff to Alzer, and a buff to Salve could also help Spell ST. And there's also overlap with like buffs to Symbiosis, with like Ethne, the Devotion version of Symbiosis. Where are the defender nerfs? Oh yeah, we could maybe just like put in more nerfs to defenders if we can't find these nerf slots. Philippa Isle provision buff. Philippa. Which one is that? This one? The C's one? This is an unconditional 21 for 10. Why do we need to buff it? Hold on one sec. So what is it actually? It's a 12 for 10 if you seize. It's a 12 for 10 if you seize a 9. Yeah, I mean, I guess you could buff it. I think one buff at most for this card. Is keeping defenders out of Necker decks the goal? No, I don't think that's the goal. I think that the goal is just to make defenders more expensive and discourage these like answer or lose type of strategies, like fall test, like triple gurney, or like, yeah, defender was played in like Colgrim or the combat engineer deck. It's just those type of decks typically not fun, where just watching them do like this huge combo that you can't interact with because of the defender. Seize is very powerful. It is. Seize usually swings an engine, right? Swings an engine. So even if you seize a 1 point per turn engine, you're getting a swing of 2 points a turn. So you can't just evaluate it by points alone. Sorry, I didn't get it. Is Brewer Dwarves good right now? Yeah, it's fairly good. Brewer Dwarves is fairly good. It's not like tier 1, I would say, but it's good enough. If you want to buff Dwarf, I would buff this card. Xavier Morn. This is like a Dwarf only type of card. And it's only 1 point a turn. It's got a pretty low starting stat line for a card that's only 1 point a turn. Make all runestones 4P. I don't know if runestones need to be 4P. Then people start playing runestones as like high rolls into the third copy of a good bronze. I think runestones are fine at 5P. They don't need to be 4P. I think runestone at 4P, like a lot of decks would just randomly play a runestone, and like sometimes they high roll into stuff, and there's not really a downside because you're not paying any extra provisions for it. Yeah, it just becomes a filler card with high roll upside, and I don't think that's actually that good for the game. For Alzer, I think I'd rather just buff Alzer's provision than like buff Orb of Insight. Because Orb of Insight, Alzer is much better spawning 6P cards than 5P cards. But yeah, like on paper, Orb of Insight probably a 5P card. But I would keep Orb at 6P and then just buff other things around it, like Alzer or Salve. Salve is also has good synergy with Orb. If Open Sesame can be a 5 provision card for 9 coins, Orb of Insight can definitely 5 provision. Yeah, like I said, on paper, Orb is better at 5P, but not with Alzer. Rainfarn is sometimes played in Hospitality. Rainfarn has a really high ceiling, too. I don't think we need to buff Rainfarn more. Is Ogroid archetype a thing? It was for a long time, and it still sometimes, occasionally sometimes is. What was the change that killed Ogroids? It was this card to 5P, right? If you had to name one one thing that killed Olgroids, I think, was this card to 5p that made Olgroids a lot weaker. Enraged Cyclops. So, if we wanted to buff Olgroids a little bit, what would you guys suggest to buff Olgroids? I do think this is a 5p card. This card plays for 10 almost all the time, and it also gives carryover for Incubus. You guys don't want to buff Olgroids at all? You have PTSD of King Crumb? Yo, I have a buff for Olgroids. I have a buff for Olgroids. I have a buff for Owzer disguised as a buff for Olgroids. Hugo to 6 provisions. Hugo to 6 provisions is a buff for Olgroids. Ogre Warrior to 5p? Nah, Ogre Warrior is fine at 6p. Hugo to 6 provisions is, right? It's a buff for Owzer, and not really a buff for much else. Or Penitent, though? Dude, Penitent... Penitent is this card salvageable? I did spell it right the first time. I just had the Olgroid filter on. Guys, is this card salvageable? I guess we also need neutrals. New deck. Start over. Monsters. Units? Like, when would you actually want to play this card? Because you want to thrive it, but you also want to kill it or consume it. And it's really low tempo. So, like, if you don't consume it right away, it has the downside of being locked or seized or banished. But if you do consume it right away, then it's like, what was the point? Because you played a 2 power, very, very specific niche tutor that required a consume. And consumes are worth at least 2 points. Right? Consumes are worth at least 2 points, and they're not that easy to come by. If you play Overwhelming Hunger, and you use Overwhelming Hunger on this, that's opportunity cost. I think we should just buff this card's power. Buff this card's power to like 5. And then it's fine. Like, you just forget about the Thrive. Maybe the Thrive is like, yeah, you just kind of forget about the fact that this has a Thrive, and then you just like, it plays for 5. And you consume it, and you spend a consume, but it's a 5-point tutor at 7 provisions instead of a 2-point tutor at 7 provisions. You want to play it into an incinerating trap, yeah. Maybe it could go to 6 provisions as well. Maybe Penitent could go to 6 provisions, but that's a nerf to Owzer. We can't be nerfing Owzer. But yeah, I think this card probably needs like 3 buffs for it to be playable. And what are its targets? Its targets are Pugo, Goliath, Beast, Phantom, but these are not that good targets. Ratcatcheress, only if you're playing Relics. Oh, and Imperial Manticore. Imperial Manticore was at one point a target for this as well. Beast probably needs to be 5 power at least. Are there any 8 provision cards that we can buff down to 7? that makes Penitent better? Oh, yes, Armored Arrakis. Armored Arrakis. I saw this idea on Reddit a week ago or two. Very, very cool synergy with Penitent. If you pull out Armored Arrakis with Penitent, it doesn't have the negative deploy, so then you can play it when the row already has some units on it, Penitent into Armored Arrakis when it already has some units on it, and then it's much easier to fill that row within the next 2 turns. And get the extra 12 boost on Armored Arrakis. Triss Telekinesis already got a provision buff. I would wait to buff her. That was a great idea from Reddit, yeah. This card is currently really weird. If you play it with the deploy, you gotta play it when there's no other cards on the row. And then you need to, within the next 2 turns, put 8 more units on that row. That's really hard. That requires a lot of commitment. Right? Like, the cheapest way to do that would be like Arrakis Nest Spontaneous Evolution or something like that. But it's pretty specific. And it goes very tall. It goes to a 17 that gets tall punished eventually. Like, this card has too high of a condition. And yeah, too high of a condition. So like, it needs to be a little bit cheaper. And if you can combo it with Penitent, it becomes a little bit more interesting. I still think it's not, like, if we were just to buff Armored Arrakis to 7 provisions, it probably still won't be comboed with Penitent, but it would be like a combination of buffing Penitent a couple of times and then also buffing Armored Arrakis down to 7, which would be very interesting. Are there any other targets for Penitent that we can buff from 8 to 7 provisions? Not really. Yeah, not really. Even if you buff like these Olgierd or Nivellen to 7 provisions, it's still not better than Pugo and Goliath. What about Nithril at 7? Damn it, I missed again. Nithril at 7? I don't think it's necessary. He's already played in Frost. He's probably fine. Can we buff Varaxis in provisions? Yeah. I think Varaxis would be a good target to buff in provisions. Doesn't buff Temple, but like nobody ever plays Varaxis in their actual decks. It's probably fine. Yeah, so I have Armored Arrakis here. Penitent. I'm gonna add Penitent to this list. Seditious Aristocrat does not need a buff. She's already played in statuses. She's very good in statuses. What about Sunset Wanderers? I don't think... I will have to say this. I don't think it's a... saying that I have not seen this card in a long time is inherently, by itself, a good reason to buff a card. This card, I think I would be okay with buffing it once, but I think one of the main reasons that people aren't playing this card anymore is because we've buffed so many of the other deck consistency thinning cards, like Oneromancy, like a bunch of 5p thinners down to 4p thinners, like Last Wish, like Roach, that this card becomes less attractive relative to those cards that all got buffs. And then like it's one of those things that can easily go into a cycle of, okay, let's buff Sunset Wanderers to the point where it's really good and people start playing it. And then you're going to be like, oh, nobody's playing Knickers anymore. Let's buff Knickers. Right? Like, I don't know. I don't know if this card really needs a buff. I think maybe once. Yeah, maybe one buff to 12 provisions and then it's done. But I'm also just not that... I'm not that excited about buffing this card. This card has its own kind of toxicity to it. It has a really big carryover aspect to it that that is not super healthy in its own way. Did Sunset release at 10 provisions? Yeah, it was extremely cheap when it was released, and every single deck played it. Every deck in the game played it when it was released. It was the definition of auto-include, to the point where Ivar became auto-include because every single opponent had Sunset Wanderers. Yeah, I'd also rather buff faction-specific cards than neutrals if possible. So we talked about NR Swarm, we talked about ST Spellitel. I do think like we could give we can give Syndicate some other alternatives to play other than like Vice or Bounty or Collusion. So Sacred Flame is like an incentive to play like more all-in Fireswarm. Casimir I also think is a pretty interesting card that I'd like to see it played a little bit by buffing it in provisions. Back Alley Chemist. I know Kerpiton really doesn't like this idea. Back Alley Chemist I do think is kind of interesting way to encourage self-poison package. And while we buff Syndicate in archetypes that aren't very strong, I would like to nerf the kind of like auto-include Syndicate cards that got overbuffed this Balance Console, which include Candle and Mariels. Arguably Bank, but I think for now maybe we can let Bank stay at 9 provisions just so that it has the playability in Golden Necker. I'm not sure if that's where we want it to be at the end of the day, but for me, Candle and Mariels were the two most unnecessary buffs for Syndicate this past Balance Console. And then Novigrad, I still think should be nerfed. Like, Novigrad is one of the most auto-include cards in Syndicate. Has a ton of carryover aspect. And we can leave some of the buffs that Syndicate got, like Bare Knuckle Brawler, like Shady Vendor, like Bank, and then nerf these cards back a little bit. Metallic Danny with the Sarah buff? No. This is not Metallic Danny's idea. I ignore, like, this is just me filling out this table that I already had. Ignore the headers. Ignore the headers here. I can even delete them. Since this does not have anything to do with who's voting for what. I just use this grid to fill in my thoughts on like 10 changes in each category. And then this area is like alternate ideas. Can we nerf Sesame? This card is in every SY pile. It's not in every SY pile. It's only played in Vice. Right? It's not. It's not played in Bounty. It's not played in Collusion. It's not played in Firesworn. Novigrad and Candle are way more auto-include than Sesame. But I'm not saying Sesame shouldn't be 6p, but we did try Sesame at 6p, right? I think there was a season where Sesame went to 6p and Vice just completely died. Like, nobody played Vice at all. But I do think, like, in an ideal world, I'd rather have Sesame at 6p and not be creatable by shady vendors. because it's such a high carryover card. It's not just a 9 for 5 with 4 points of carryover. It's also the fact that like those coins are worth more than 1-to-1, often with like Oxford Guard. Those coins help you trigger the Acherontia or Exora multiple times on the turn that they're played, and just give you additional spending on efficient spenders that are spending like 2-to-1 or 3-to-2 or something like that. Sacred Flame Back Alley and Casimir buffs sound exciting. Yeah, nice. Yeah, if you nerf Sesame to 6p, maybe we can. What we could do if we nerf Sesame to 6p is we could buff Acherontia to 11p or whatever. Yeah, like give Acherontia the provisions back, or partially or fully the provisions that were taken away from Sesame. You could just swap, right? Swap those 2 provisions from Sesame to Acherontia and have the overall deck be the same provisions, but just lose the RNG factor of Shady Vendoring into more Sesames. You'd rather Shady Vendor at 6 provisions. I mean, yeah, there's an argument for a lot of things here. Acherontia is not played without Sesames. I agree. That's why it doesn't really matter where the provisions come from, right? It doesn't matter if Acherontia is 12 and Sesames are 5, or Acherontia is 10 and Sesames are 6. Like, they're always played together. So it doesn't really matter if you swap the provisions within the package. But by moving Sesames to 6p while keeping the overall provisions the same, you get rid of the RNG factor, because like the RNG factor is really exacerbated here because of how much carryover potential there is in this card. And getting an extra 1 or 2 copies of Sesame often is the difference between winning or losing the game, because there's so much carryover there. Then you may incentivize Acherontia Greed. Acherontia is not going to get greeded. You can't play Acherontia without a very consistent plan of activating it at least once on the turn that it's played. And you can do it, I think, without Sesames. You can do it without Sesames, but you're always going to play it with Sesames. Sesames make Bleeding Syndicate such a terrifying task. I do think it's both Novigrad and Sesame contribute to this. I think it's probably a little bit more Novigrad. This meta, many Syndicate decks are not running Novigrad? Wait, what? What meta are you playing in, Sheath? You're saying Vice decks that run Sesame are not running Novigrad? I haven't seen it. I've seen Novigrad in every Vice deck. And a lot of non-Vice decks, too. Did Kerpiton cut Novigrad? I don't know. I know that Kerpiton was playing some Vice Bounty hybrid. Maybe he had to cut Novigrad to fit in the Vice Bounty hybrid, but I would be surprised still. But yeah. I mean, in terms of what's meta and what you see on ladder, Novigrad is still in pretty much every Vice deck. Even if Kerpiton did end up cutting it, which I kind of doubt. Maybe he's here to shed some light on it. Any other packages here that I have like a little bit of reverts kind of slipped in here. I think like 1 power increase to Demon Pirate would be good. Like 1 provision buff to Boar of Clans, 1 provision buff to Ward of Brocklin. These are reverts, but I do think that they They are small reverts that put these archetypes back to a more healthier place. I think it's easier to get to pro rank now, but I haven't actually made the climb to pro rank ever. But I would guess it's easier. Yeah. I think that's like a good start. There's also some talk about like buffing Artists. I'm not really sure what deck you play Artists in. Like, what deck do you actually play Artists in? Like do you play it in a Saris Fearless, like kind of red self wound deck? But when you build it, my big question is, when you build a deck with Artists, do you build it with the assumption that Artist is going to survive? Or do you build it with the assumption that Artist is going to die? Because between those two assumptions, it's a very different, like, how many Berserk cards you put into your deck, right? If you assume Artist is going to die, you don't put that many Berserk cards into your deck. Or if you do, you have to put a lot of Self Wound in your deck as well. But if you assume Artist is going to live, then you actually want to put more Berserk cards and fewer Self Wound cards, because your Berserk cards are just going to get Self Wounded by Artist. Right? Yeah, he always dies. That's the thing. He always dies, so then, like, is it even an Artist deck if Artist always dies? Just to thin, yeah. Like, but that's boring. That's so boring to me. If you just play Artist just to thin, and it's just like a point slam card to thin either Berserker or Fanatic. Does Artist damage by 2 or 3 a 5 power unit? It damages by 3. The damage rounds up. So the Syndicate Killer Mob have got... It's Irregular! Welcome, Irregular, to the Syndicate Hate stream channel. Look, so many buffs for Syndicate here. Sacred Flame, Casimir, Fallen Rayla, Back Alley Chemist. We love Syndicate. Penitent. No, not Penitent. Procession of Penance, I meant. We love Syndicate here. There's less tryharding, more meme decks, more huge mistakes. Yeah, so ladder's probably easier. Anyways, I think we're wrapping up. Like, the big archetypes that we want to buff are, at least for me right now, are like NR Swarm, Spell ST, Fire Swarm Syndicate, Casimir, like spend to 0 kind of Syndicate, Self Poison Syndicate, and where was there was one more. I do believe there was one more. Oh yeah, and like Penitent Armored Arrakis kind of package thing. There's a lot to and also Sarret. I do want to buff some Nilfgaard as well, but it's hard. It's difficult to find good ways to buff Nilfgaard. I think Sarret... China wanted a Fawn to 9 provisions, which maybe we could try. Procession of Penitent, yeah, exactly. We have a quick take. You know, the leaders got way too many provisions this year. I would take some provisions there instead of cards. I agree with you that the leaders in Syndicate especially got too many provisions. But it's already a huge struggle for me and the other influencers and just in general with anybody trying to come up with 40 changes, 10 changes in each category. It's a huge struggle to come up with 10 good changes in these two categories. Power decrease and provision increase categories. And if you want to decrease, if we were going to decrease provisions on leaders, we have to put them in this category. We have to put a nerf in this category, and then we have to put still 10 nerfs in this category and 10 nerfs in this category. It's so difficult to change buff slots into nerf slots and still maintain like a good overall balance console, which is why I think like as long as there are overtuned cards like Novigrad and Candle, it makes more sense to nerf them and use nerf slots to nerf them when they're like pretty much played in almost every single Syndicate deck anyways, than using a buff slot for a nerf on a leader. Where can I find this Google Sheet link? It's exclamation deck. So it's like exclamation deck will probably take you here to my decks that I've played in this season, and then the second tab is balance console ideas that we're looking at right now. It would be nice if we had more buffs than nerfs. I asked them for this like 10 times before they went on their vacation forever. But they were like, nope. There's only one number. It's impossible. Impossible to do because there's only one number in the code, in the spaghetti code, that governs how many slots there are for each category. Probably in a very soon future, we would have to make a coalition to rotate nerfs and buffs. Maybe you're saying like we're gonna get to a spot where things are well balanced enough that there are nothing that we really want to nerf anymore, and we would basically need to nerf stuff that would then get buffed back the next season. Maybe. Overall, buffs are way more plentiful to find than nerfs. I think more likely on that point of like if we eventually run out of things to nerf, I think rather than making a rotation of nerfs and then reverting them the next season, I would rather just... Personally, I would rather just nerf throwaway cards. Like Foltest, like Living Armor, like Traherne. And just like pick a couple of cards that... like Yaga, that are better off just not existing in the game, and just nerf them to 100 provisions. At least you can do that with this category. Power decrease might be a little bit harder. Eventually you're going to run out of stuff to nerf in the power decrease category. You know what would be funny? If you nerf something to 100 provisions, and then you... Let's say we nerfed Foltest to like 50 provisions, right? And then you created him through Temple or some other thing, through like Taurus or something. Not Taurus, Henry or Temple. And then you played like one of the Vivians. Whichever Vivian sets a unit or boosts herself by the number of provisions of a card. And then you'd have like a 50-point Vivian. That's probably niche enough that it's not a big deal. That's probably unlikely enough that it's not a big deal, but that could happen one day. I like the idea of sending a card to the Shadow Realm with 100 provisions. New deck archetype. Have there been any changes to Riptide in the last few months? Depends on what you mean by few. The Riptide got changed a few times. It was 10 power 8 provisions originally, then it went to 9 power 8 provisions, then it went to 10 power 8 provisions, then it went to 10 power 9 provisions. And I think 10 power 9 provisions is probably a good spot for it. If we were gonna nerf it, I don't think it's good to buff Riptide from its current position at 10 power 9 provisions. He's still played in a lot of monster decks. He's just very, very good control. If we were to change it, I would change it to 9 power 9 provisions. But I also don't think I also think it's like fine not to change him. It used to be like auto include in almost all monster decks. Has anything changed there, or is it just other factions getting so many buffs that it's less noticeable now? I mean, he did get nerfed, but he's still kind of auto include. Because there's just not that many efficient removal tools that can kill a 10 or less. Yes, he's got conditions, but very, very powerful removal. Not possible to buff something or to move to, yeah, not possible to nerf something to less than 1 power. Monsters isn't played much right now. I would say Monsters is played a fair amount. What do you think about Eltibald? Eltibald is buffable, but he's probably one of those cards. He has a really, really high ceiling, especially with cards like Sir Scratch-a-Lot. If you did buff him, I would only buff him 1 time. Very small buff. Okay. All right. I think we've talked a lot about this today. It was fun. It was fun talking about this. It's still early in the season, so there's still like a lot of time to come up with ideas or consolidate. I'm thinking about doing like, what would be interesting is if we took, say, like these cards that we have here and we put them in a poll or a survey and just, I wanted to phrase, not just like say pick 3 or something, but I would want to say that more phrase the survey or phrase the question as like, check this box if you would support this change. Like, if we had this card in our balance council for the English coalition or the English community coalition, would you or would you not support this change? Would you or would you not vote with this change? I think that's more important to me than like, what are the top 3 cards everybody wants to change? Not necessarily do a poll for each card. We just have a big poll with all these cards listed with a checkbox next to them, and you just check every single one that you would support. But if there's a card there that like, if we put it on our balance council for the English community, but you don't like it and you would not vote with us for this card, then I would want to know. We would want to know that you would not vote with us and it would not have the community support. And maybe even if we really like the change, even if say Lirio and I really like this change, but there's very, very little support from the community, then we might not put it on our list, because then it won't actually go through if a lot of people wouldn't support it. I think that's a more important information to us than like what's everyone's top 3. I vote with whatever Shinmiri wants. Yeah, if you actually do that, if you actually would vote with whatever we choose, then you could just like check everything. It would be the same thing as like, I'll vote with whatever you choose.